Hi YouTube, this is Darkon633, and today we're taking a look at another Voltron release. Today we're going to take a look at Playmates releases of the original classic lines based on their designs on the original Voltron anime series that was also known as Go Lion in Japan. This is really nice that Playmates went ahead and actually made a set of classic lions, and I think a lot of fans were anticipating that they were going to release another version of this outside of the legendary Defender lines. We're actually going to look at each of the lines individually. There isn't a whole lot of difference between the two legs and the two limbs, and obviously the black line would be the most unique out of them since it is the main torso. But anyways, we'll move on to the red line first. As stated, the first line we're going to look at is Lance's red line. This is actually a really nice release, and although it's very blocky, it's definitely reminiscent of the original design. What's really cool is that Playmates actually went ahead and released them with their actual sidearm weapons for the actual lines themselves, and I find that really awesome. Obviously, all of these have spring-loaded missiles, which we're just going to take off to the side, just to show it off on the review there. Articulation-wise, he does have very similar articulation as seen with the legendary lines, although I think it works a little bit better due to their kind of blockier nature outside of the more ovular nature that I've seen with the legendary lines. He does have ratchets on the back legs, ratchets on the knees of those legs as well, and ratchets on his feet. The same articulation can be seen in the front with swivels, with a good deal of articulation there. He can swivel 360 there because it is one of the arms, and it can bend left and right as well because of that. He also has a ratchet in the head, but it can't really do anything else outside of the spring-loaded articulated mount we've seen, very similar to the legendary lines. One thing to note is that the original toy designs actually had number detailing on the lines, and from what I could tell, even in the original anime series, they were not numbers, so that was something I think they added specifically for the toy line. I guess it was just a way to differentiate them, but it's nice that we actually have some accuracy there. Each of the lines also include their signature weapons, so we actually have the mouth blades that the lions can actually use. Basically what happens is that inside we do have this little area where you can actually plug in the weapon, and because of the spring-loaded nature of the head, he does have the ability to hold on to it very nicely. As a comparison, here is the classic line next to the legendary Defender one, which definitely has a quite different design, although it's pretty reminiscent for what we see here. So that's really awesome what we got so far. Anyways, we'll now move on to the green line. And the second line we're going to look at is the green lion. I did actually forget to mention that the red lion actually came with the actual sword, so that's really nice. Unfortunately, it's not painted. It is sculpted pretty nicely, although it did need quite a bit of paint in order for it to be a lot better. Luckily, the green line actually comes with a shield, which is a little bit better painted since it does actually have a few paint applications, although there is quite a bit that's missing on this design as well. As some of the other lines we've gotten, he does have the mouth blade, which is a little bit more symmetrical this time, which can fit in the same way that can be seen with the red line. It does plug in on the inside, and it does hold in pretty decently. Unfortunately, mine does have a bit of QC problems, since out of the box it already had some scuff marks. I actually got this from ToysRUs.com, so yeah, it's definitely not the best copy I've gotten. In terms of articulation, it's the exact same thing. I did forget to mention that the tails are articulated, so we got that. He does maintain the same ratchets on the hips, as well as the knees, as well as the feet. So you're not going to get a whole lot of difference, and he does maintain the same ratchet in the head. As seen with the red line, once again, there is no number on that particular part of the line, once again, but that's still cool since it is still pretty accurate. As comparison, here is the original style green line next to the legendary Defender version, and it's definitely a lot smaller since this one definitely got a lot bulkier in the new design, but it's still nice, so we even got these lines to begin with. So anyways, we're now going to take a look at the first of the feet pieces, and that is the blue line. And now we're looking at Princess Alora's blue line. Now in the original series, the blue line also was piloted by Sven, but due to circumstances that happened within the show, he was incapacitated or pretty much dead in the Go Lion adaptation. I'm not really sure what happened too far in the Voltron anime series since I didn't actually finish it, but I could tell that he was badly injured, and that's why Princess Laura took his place soon after. In terms of the design, it's definitely a lot bulkier than we've seen with the arm limbs, and that's understandable since these are supposed to be the feet, so they do need to have quite a bit of bulk in order to keep the actual Voltron formation up pretty decently. Unfortunately, because of that, he does not have any articulation in the actual abdomen area, but he does maintain the same hip joints, the same knee joints, the same feet articulation, and the head doesn't really have the same amount of articulation, since it does kind of only swivel left and right, but it does actually bend really nicely up and down. It does have an extra ratchet, obviously, for the formation of the Voltron itself, and once again, it does not have the number on that area once again. The tail technically is articulated, but it's mainly due to transformation, so you're not going to get the articulation that we've seen with the arms, but as similar with the other lines, it does feature the mouth blade, and I think this one has the problem. Inside, yeah, I see it. There was a little bit of a paint bleed inside the mouth, so definitely the QC on these particular products is just not up to par. At least the toys themselves are pretty decently made. It's just the paint is definitely not a forte on Playmates' part there. He does have the side weapons once again, and actually has missile launcher with the pretty interesting hidden trigger. Basically, this particular part right here is the trigger, and just looking up close, I think it's not really easy to tell that's the trigger mechanism. As a comparison, here is the Classic line next to the Legendary line, and it's definitely got a lot of inspiration once again. It does have very similar articulation in terms of design, but it's still really nice we got this. Anyway, so now look at the final limb, and that is Hung's Yellow Line. And now we're looking at Hung's Yellow Line. It's very similar to what we've seen with the Blue Line in terms of blockiness. The articulation is exactly the same. It does maintain the same hip joints, the same knee joints, the same joints in the feet. You're not going to get a whole lot of difference in the lines themselves, and it does maintain the same articulation as we've seen with the Blue Line, although this one's a little bit kind of squeakier. I think the joint is a lot tighter on this copy of mine than the Blue Line. It does also have this other point here which can move. I'm not 100% sure what for, like what reason that's for, but I think it's mainly because you do need to put the tail in, and because of these little fin pieces, it's a little bit harder to pull out, so I think they just found a way so that you can actually remove the tail from the location and put it up. He does include the mouth blade as well, which definitely, this one's the most different. It's really annoying in my opinion, since the color of the actual blade is not the same as the line. It's definitely more of a mustard color rather than what we've seen with the line itself. You can place in the weapon into his mouth as normal, so that's really nice that we actually got these weapons. He does have the missile firing gimmick, and it's another pretty decently hidden area, since it is this upper area where you press down in order to fire the missile, and he does have this little spike shield thing. As a comparison, here he is next to the Defender version of the Yellow Line. It's drastically different compared to all the other lines, since they decided to go with this giant disc shooter on top of his body, so it's definitely the most alarmingly different compared to the other lines, since we don't have actually these large kind of weapons sticking out as much. While the others do have the missile firing launchers, they're definitely not as noticeable compared to what we've seen here, since this is just overly extremely bulky. Anyways, we're now going to take a look at the main line, the Black Line. And now we're going to take a look at Cute's Black Line. Now, while the Legendary Defender version of the Black Line is definitely bulky in its own right, I think just because of how blocky this design is, in my opinion, this just seems a lot bulkier compared to the other versions, since it's a lot more angular and have a lot more oval areas within the body, so it's a little bit more smooth rather than here it's just kind of like a cube, so that's why it just looks bigger than the other line. In terms of articulation, you're going to get some pretty interesting ones. It's very similar to what we've seen with the Legendary version. He does have ratchets in the hips as well. He does have that kind of cut in the knee just for that, and he does have the swivels there. He does have ratchets in this part of the foot as well as the bottom part. You can swivel these pieces 360, but only in one direction, and it does kind of get bumped against the side, but that's mainly due to transformation. It does have ratchets in the knees there. same joints there. And actually, this is where it's a lot better on the Classic Voltron release than we've seen with the Legendary Defender Black Lion, since he does actually have head articulation. That was the main problem that was actually featured for the Legendary version, since it's pretty much static, you really couldn't do anything, and you can actually look quite far down and okay up. You're not going to get a whole lot of give up, but you definitely have a lot more going down due to the transformation of the head mode. Similar to what we've seen with the Legendary version, you can open the mouth, and inside it does have the actual Voltron's face hidden inside. And obviously the ears move, but that's mainly because of the Voltron transformation. He does have wing articulation as well, so you can swivel this up and down, and you can swivel this around as well. He does have another joint here, and that's about it in terms of articulation. Similar to what we also seen with the Black Lion, there is an on and off switch here, since it does have a voice box. When you press this button, it will actually make sounds, and the chest will light up when you activate the sounds. So let's see if we can get this onto frame.
The galaxy is about to be secure.
Form
Voltron!
We're not going to go through all the sounds, but
Form Voltron!
we're actually going to go through just a couple of them.
He'll soon be defeated by Voltron, defender of the universe! Activate laser blades! We will defend this planet! Lotor, your evil forces will never defeat us! Hagar's Robeast is about to have a bad day!
Now, I was specifically going to that sound since for some reason the voice actor that they went to program it onto this Voltron decided to call her Hagar, even though technically her name's supposed to be Hagar, so I guess it's just a pronunciation thing, but that's something that was really weird. Actually, I forgot to mention he does have the tail articulation as well, but that's mainly due to transformation. As a comparison, here is the Classic Black Lion next to the Legendary version, which was definitely quite different due to the way that the overall body design was like, and just how the wing design is to begin with. This one's a little bit more of a stylized wing design, while this one's a little bit more simple, so it's definitely quite different than what we've seen with the Classic Lions. Anyways, speaking of Voltron, we're now going to go on to the full combination. Now, before anything else, I have to say that this Voltron definitely has the G1 Transformer aesthetic, since when you go to the transformation and just the combinations in general, you're going to have a lot of pieces left over, since none of these are actually used for the Voltron transformation, which can be a little bit annoying, but it's still nice that it does include all those little gimmicks there. Anyways, so now move on to transferring the arms first, and then we're going to move on to the legs. First, what we're going to do is, using the ratchets, we're going to collapse pretty much everything. So this is very similar to what we've seen with the Legendary design Voltron. We're going to put these in as well. So you got something that looks like this. The tail is a little bit different, since it makes it a lot easier to actually pull out the actual transformation, the combination piece, because it actually goes into this empty cavity inside. And unfortunately, it's a little bit harder, actually, from what I could tell, to actually put the tail in. It does have a little bit of pressure needed to actually push it in, but it's a little bit more annoying than I would have liked. We're going to do the same thing with the Green Lion. So, as you can tell, it's definitely not the most complex transformation out there, but it's nice that it actually is pretty compact and pretty nice looking, since it does actually put everything in pretty decently. So we're going to plunk this in. It was definitely a lot easier than usual, but it's definitely not the easiest way to actually put away the limbs. We'll now move on to the blue line first. We're going to ratchet the head, and this will form the feet on this side. So we're going to put these here. For what I can tell, actually, I think these are actually definitely a lot more sturdy than what I've seen with the Legendary Defender Voltron, so it does actually stay up much better than what we've seen with the Legendary release. I'm going to ratchet this together, so now it looks like this, and then collapse the tail. So we got one of the feet ready, and we're going to do the same for the other side. It's definitely not rocket science when it comes to the actual transformation. So now we got both of the feet and the arms. Now we're going to transform the body. What we're going to do is put these forward, since this will form the wings. So it looks like this. We're going to open up these compartments, and this is very similar to what I've seen with some of the other Voltron releases, at least for the original design. We're going to collapse feet and close the doors. Swivel these so that the red parts face forward, and then, similar to what we've seen with the Legendary release, just ratchet the feet into this position. Put away the tail, which definitely stays a lot better than what I've seen with the Legendary release, and then pull down the face and the ears. So now we got Voltron ready for formation. Now, unfortunately, my copy of the Black Lion is a little bit defective. Basically, what's going to happen is that it's very similar to the Legendary Voltron release once again. Sorry for the repetition. They're actually going to press these little buttons inside, and it will actually go through the combination sounds. But unfortunately, my Black Lion is definitely a little bit more glitchy than I would like it to. Anyways, we'll now move on to the combinations. So, first,
Blue Lion, coming in.
so we got that recognized.
Pidge, is that you? Where are you? We're going to need the yellow lion, hunk. Form, arms, and body. Pidge, is that you? Where are you? Form, arms, and body.
Fortunately, for some reason, it doesn't have any sound for Lance, unfortunately. Anyways, so now slide this in. So now, we got the legs together.
Yellow lion, leaping into action.
And then, we're going to plug in the arms. So first, we're going to plug in the red lion. Hopefully, this will not go crazy on me.
Come on, team.
As you can see, it's already starting to.
Yes, that was some great teamwork.
Fortunately, this is why I think this is definitely not the best copy. It does have a little bit better actually staying with the green line, so we're going to actually go for that first.
Set to go, Keith.
And from here, I'm actually going to hold on to this,
Some great teamwork.
since it's actually going to go crazy otherwise. So we go.
Green Lion, armed for battle. Ready to form Voltron. Activate interlocks. Dynatherms connected. Infracells up. Mega thrusters are go. Form feet and legs. Form arms and body. And I'll form the head. Go Voltron! Form blazing sword.
So that's really awesome. I'm actually going to turn it off and
I'm going
put this actually into better view. So we're going to move the camera and see how he looks fully combined. And now we got Voltron fully formed. Now this is an extremely good representation, in my opinion, of the original Voltron design. One thing to note, and I think a lot of fans have already pointed out, is that the actual red area is a little bit smaller than it needed to be, since it does have the large voice box actually built into it. It is a little bit on the strange looking side on the chest, but other than that, it's still nice in my opinion. He can carry the blazing sword very nicely, since it does use the same peg design that we've seen with the individual weapons. But unfortunately, I can't say the same thing about the shield. For some reason, the shield just does not like to stay on his hand as well as I would like it to. It does maintain the same peg design, and I think it's mostly because you do plug it in on sideways rather than just forward. So while it does stay on okay when you plug it in originally, is when you turn it is when it starts kind of drooping out, and as you can see, it just does not like to stay on as well as I would like. So I'm just going to take the shield out to the side and take a look at Voltron himself. He does use the same articulation as we've seen with the lines themselves. Obviously, one of the major differences is that the head is articulated, although it does have a little bit of this weird design in the neck. But it's nice since it does kind of hide in the cavity there. It does have the swivels at the shoulders and outward movement. Swivels at the elbows with the elbow movement as well. It doesn't have side to side, so you are putting it forward and backward rather than from side to side with the lines. It does have the same ratchet in the hand. No waist articulation, but it does have some really nice hip articulation. That knee joint, as I mentioned earlier, but it does break up the design a bit, as well as the secondary knee joint there, and ankle pivots because of the design of the lines themselves. As a comparison, here is the Classic Lions next to the Legendary Defender version of Voltron, which is a little bit smaller actually for what I can tell. It might be a little bit taller, it's hard to tell, but you do need to kind of plug in the limbs properly, since otherwise he will start drooping over. So that is a bit on the unfortunate side when it comes to the Legendary version of the Lions. Sometimes it's really hard to actually get this together, but you do need to play around with the little back pieces in order to get it into place. But he does manage to stand eventually. So we're going to play around with it in order to make sure he can stand. We're just going to plug it into the back here so that he won't fall. But you pretty much get the idea when it comes to these two Voltron releases. In terms of the two designs, it's definitely a preference if you prefer the classic design over the Legendary Voltron take on Voltron. One thing to note is that, as I mentioned earlier, mine does have a little bit of a defect, since he's supposed to fully attach the arms and then it's going to go through a cycle of sounds, but because of the way that the buttons aren't pressing properly, from what I could tell, it's just going to constantly go onto the transformation side. And I've worked a couple of hours to actually try to get it into place, but unfortunately it just seems like I might have to get a new version of the Black Lion in order to do it properly. So outside of the unfortunate defect on my copy, it's definitely very nice to have seen with the Classic Voltrons here, especially since each of the individual limbs, and depending on what store you get it from, if you get it on sale, it's just to be an estimate around the $15 to $20 price point. As for the Black Lion, it's around the $30 price point. So when you actually put it all together, you're definitely spending a lot less than you would go ahead and release, maybe getting one of the original versions of Voltron due to the secondary prices, or any of the Masterpiece style Voltron, since they are very expensive. So your best bet is to get this version, since it does nice for what it needs to do. It's definitely not the most perfect toy out there, but in terms of a kid's toy and the overall representation of the original Voltron, it's definitely one of the better releases, especially when comparing it to the very lackluster version that Matty released many years back. That thing was kind of a piece of trash. But anyways, other than that, this is definitely a very nice Voltron release, and I'm glad to finally have it for my collection. I got this at Toys R Us, including every single one of the limbs, since it seems like I'm having a hard time actually finding these in my area. It's nice that I was actually able to get them on the website, since unlike the Legendary Voltron limbs, which are extremely hard to get a hold of, this Voltron is actually quite easy to get, and for what I could tell, a lot of the limbs were in stock for a while. So your best bet is to probably just check the Toys R Us website, and maybe some Targets and a few other places, since they have been appearing in several locations. Anyways, please comment, rate, and subscribe, and check out Hero Club and Hero Taku. Also check out Returner Darkon633, and also on Instagram under Darkon633 as well. Please check the little bell at the bottom of the screen in order to see my content go as soon as possible, and please check down the other channels down below. I'll be back with more Voltron reviews and more, but for now, I'll be seeing you later, YouTube. Bye.